Knowledge for Men, episode 114. Welcome to knowledgeformen.com, where you're going to grow into the man you want to be. Your life will never be the same again. I can guarantee it. The father of personal development, Jim Rohn, said it best. You are the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And so I've created a mastermind community called the Lion's Den around this idea that if you are surrounded by high-performing people and you have consistent education and training, then you will succeed in life and as a man. Check out kfmlion.com to learn how the Lion's Den can take your life, relationships, and business to the next level. Again, that's kfmlion.com. All right, guys, I'm here with Scott Gornto, a therapist with over 20 years of experience and author of The Stories That We Tell Ourselves. Stop jumping to conclusions, free yourself from anxiety, and transform your relationships. He's got some really interesting ideas and concepts that we're going to dive into here today. So I got Scott here. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
All right, so we kickstart off every show, Scott, with a favorite success quote from the guest or a saying that they've lived by. So what do you got, and explain why you chose that?
Yeah, one that comes to mind is one from the book. It comes from a friend of mine named Rick Carson. He says that, an opinion or a belief is an opinion we develop loyalty to over time. So I'll say that again for a little more clarity. A belief is an opinion we develop loyalty to over time. And what's interesting about that is when we develop beliefs in our life, they turn into behavior. And so whether it's treating someone a certain way or whether it's an action we take in a relationship or in business, when we develop these opinions and they really become very fond to us and we're really loyal to them, we end up doing certain behaviors. And so our beliefs create or determine our reality. So it's something that I have really kept in mind in my own life, and it really challenged some of my beliefs at times, not just going with my first belief, but actually thinking through some of the beliefs that I have. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book.
Yeah, and before we dive into kind of the book, I want to learn more about you as a person and kind of how you got started in this area of therapy and kind of build up towards the writing of the book, The Stories That We Tell Ourselves. So go ahead and share with the audience how you got started with all this.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good. I originally got the idea to do this type of work, meaning, a therapist, coach, guide sort of thing, back when I was in high school. I had a lot of either friends coming to me, just people in my life who would just ask me questions and ask for advice on things. And I think part of that came from my parents. They had a lot of people coming to them over the years, and whether they talked to couples together or whether they talked to individuals and helping them in personal development, or whether they helped them and my dad's a financial planner, so he helped the folks with their financial plan and planning their future. And just both of them, I think have had a lot of wisdom. So I think gleaning from some of that wisdom from them, and then also when I went into college, I had several roles that I was in leading different book studies and kind of spiritual communities that I would lead, and that folks would ask me to kind of help them with different issues related to life. And so I think that was a big part of what brought me to what I do. Not to mention that my personality, I think, is I like having deep conversations. I don't mind a surface conversation here or there, but I like having deeper conversations, so it's just enjoyable for me. And the other piece is that I'm a big fan of personal development. My whole entire life, I'm dedicated, I think, to personal development. In fact, my best friend from high school and still a good pal of mine, here I'm 41 now. So for the last, we've known each other and been friends for over 30, 35 years. And he, each time we call, he makes some joke about that because, he says, I'm off writing books or working on, guitar lessons or doing some self-improvement plan. And so I just love growing and maturing. And so it's just something I'm passionate about personally. And then certainly working with folks to help them achieve some of their goals in life, whether it's reducing anxiety or improving a relationship or marriage, helping increase some more peace in their life and reduce pain.
Yeah, it's really, interesting. I always like hearing about someone who's like found their thing at a young age and was able to really like dial in and go all in and really commit their career to something. It really sounds like it was almost like your calling to do the work that you're doing, because you mentioned from a young age people were seeking advice from you, asking you questions, and you actually enjoyed being on the other side of that and going deep with people.
I would definitely say it's a calling. It's not something I do because I'm paying the bills. It's something I do because I love it and I'm passionate about it, both in helping people, but also something that I love to do because I do it in my own life. So absolutely, it's something. I think anything that we do in life that comes from inside of us and that we're doing it and kind of embodying it and really living it out is something that we have more passion about. And so people, I think, can feel that because they know it's coming from a place from your heart and from your soul and not just something that you've studied and are trying to implement.
So it's something that you're naturally good at versus something that you're forcing yourself to try and be good at.
Exactly.
And now your book here, the stories that we tell ourselves. And so how did this come to be? Like what really triggered you to write this book? And yeah, just kind of like walk us through the steps that happened to where you are now.
You know, um, Several reasons it came together. One, after walking with people through their struggles or through things that they were, situations, circumstances that they were going through in their life, I began to see a theme. And this is even in college. So this is 20 plus years ago, I began to see this. But I began to put it together just in language, in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years in my work as a therapist, because I've been working as a therapist for about 15 years now. And the theme that I saw is that people would come in and there was a narrative about typically whether they're coming in for personal development related to improving, like I would work with CEOs and I do a kind of emotional intelligence training with them, or whether it be with couples that would come in or someone individually that would come in, they'll be talking about their mother or their father. I mean, different ages that they were coming in and they were talking about relationships and how those relationships cause them stress. And I think as human beings, my particular belief is that we're sort of made for relationships. I mean, relationships bring life to us. It's a source of it's life. They can be life giving, but they can also be very painful and they can be frustrating and they can be anxiety provoking. And so, one of the themes that I saw was in the sort of anxiety provoking piece of this was we would tell ourselves stories. I included I'm including myself in this, that as human beings we tell ourselves stories about other people when we don't have all the information. So it might be, I'll give you an example. Like for instance, a boss sends you an email on Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. and says, "Hey, I need to talk with you first thing Monday morning." And you create a story in your head about what over the weekend about what your boss is going to say or do. What that meeting is going to be like. It could be where your 17-year-old daughter is out on a date and with a new boyfriend, and you try to text her and you can't get a hold of her, and she's an hour past her curfew, and you begin to make up stories about what's going on. And so, how this came about is that I just saw this narrative going on more and more and more in people's lives. And I also saw it specifically with couples. Like, for instance, a spouse would say to another, they would communicate some message. I'm trying to think of an example here in a moment, but they try to communicate some message to the other, and the way that the other would receive it would be not fully understanding it, and sometimes jumping to conclusions and assuming things, and really not hearing really what they meant. So, like for an example might come to mind where a spouse might say, I'm really wanting more intimacy in our relationship, and all of a sudden the response could be from the other, what do you mean you want more intimacy? We've had sex 3 times this week, and actually the response back is, whoa, I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about dialogue and talking or spending time together. We just haven't had much time just to be together. So I think there are times that we jump to conclusions even in just regular conversations, not to mention, anxiety provoking situations that when we don't have all the information, we fill in the blanks. So really it came out of just working with people and just hearing these stories over and over again and how they caused distance and frustrations in relationships.
Yeah, so you were seeing common themes amongst your clients for the last 20 years or so. You just kept seeing the same, your clients are saying the same thing over and over. So this really sparked the idea for the book. And how long did it take to write the book?
I started out early last year, February, March of 2013, putting it together. And after working on it for about 6 months, and learning through the process of how, because it was new to me, this first book that I'm putting out, and I have plans to put out some more. But just a learning curve was, just kind of straight up in the air. I mean, I'm learning all sorts of new information. So I got 6 months in, and I put pause on it for a variety of reasons, and went back and scrapped a bunch of it, and then and really began I took a break for 3 months and kind of put some more thoughts down on paper and took a step back, and probably, early part of this year, I really began to dig in again. And over the last, probably, I would say, March through about August, just really honed in on dedicating all my time to that I could outside of seeing clients, because I do see clients every day from really pretty much 8 to 5. So in the evenings, after, my wife and I put the kids down, or in the morning first thing, I'd work on it on weekends, that sort of thing. So really, I've dedicated much of the time over the last, 6 months up until August, and then released the book October 21st.
All right. Well, congratulations on completing the book while having a family,
Yeah.
wife and kids, and having a full-time job. That's some serious dedication and accomplishment in itself. Well, now onto the book. The stories that we tell ourselves, where do they come from? Let's start right here.
Yeah, it's great. I think these stories come from a number of different places. I like to say when our brains don't have all the information, we have a tendency to fill in the blanks. It's like a vacuum, and it's just a way we live life. And I think part of the reason we do it is that we're seeking safety or familiarity or comfort. We want to know things, and when we don't know, it creates anxiety, and so we search for answers. Sometimes frantically. Sometimes some folks are a little better at it than others in terms of able to turn down that volume of intensity. But where they come from, they could come from all sorts of places. They can come from your upbringing within your family, and whether it be a particular way that y'all did life as a family, or certain messages that were communicated from the family. Don't hang out with these people, or be suspicious of this, or be afraid of this, and just different messages we hear from our parents. But it also comes from our families, being that, just being around our moms and dads, and how they raised us, how they parented us, and how that influences us as human beings, and sort of the programming that gets implemented or digested in our systems can play a role. The other places I think where they come from are our culture, the media. Like, let's take, for example, there's a story we tell ourselves, for many of us, that we watch romantic films, let's say in our teenage years or college years, and we sort of make up in our head that what it means to be married is to have this romance and this excitement and all this energy, when many times it's not necessarily exactly like that. And so when those two don't match, it creates some frustration or disappointment or anxiety. So it's another narrative that gets played out. So I think media plays a role, culture. I also think past events, past traumatic events or disappointments play a role, right? If I've had a job, let's say I'm 28, I got out of college, and I've had 3 jobs in 6 years, and during that time I've lost 2 jobs from getting fired, and all of a sudden my boss, like I said earlier, sends me an email Friday afternoon saying, I want to talk Monday morning. More than likely, I'm going to go more to that fear of what the past brought. And so when we go through difficult situations in the past, the tendency is to kind of rewind and go back and use history as a barometer or an indicator. And sometimes that can be helpful to us, and sometimes it can get in the way. So those are a few places where it comes from. There's a few other places that I talk about in the book, but those are some of the main ones.
And you mentioned something where we immediately think from the negative first. So if we get a call from or a message from the boss, we think, what did I do wrong? We start kind of covering our tracks, like, oh, what did I, no, I didn't. What could it be? I don't know. Well, why is it that we tell ourselves these stories, and we lean to the negative first?
It's a question I get asked a lot, and I think part of it is that we, more than most things in our life, we want to avoid fear and anxiety, and our tendency sometimes is to seek more safety. And so, I think we can train our brains, and one of the things I talk about in the book is kind of training your brain through a process called neuroplasticity, where you're able to train your brain to think a little differently, right? We can't control the first thought that comes in our brain, but we can control the second. And so it's a way of, doing life that if we have a thought come in that's negative, we can replace it with something that's positive. That's something that's a choice that we have. But as far as the reasons why we do that, we lean towards the negative. I think that it's kind of like a fight or flight type of thing. When we don't have the information and things are uncertain, it's kind of like, walking into a room that we convince ourselves that maybe somebody's in there, but we don't know what's behind the door. And so we can create all sorts of fear inside of our bodies without even really knowing what's going on behind the door. So I think some of it has to do with this fight or flight part of us as human beings, this survival part of us, to kind of hold on to ourselves and not let anxiety take over. So if we overthink think about it, or we really spend all this energy being anxious about it, that somehow tells us that we're doing something about it. Although that doesn't necessarily help us many times, but sometimes we can convince ourselves of that.
Yeah, and we talked about, a work example and the father worried about the daughter, but I was just kind of thinking of some other examples that could, really relate and resonate with my audience, and some of them can be like, sales and marketing is evil. Like money is the root of all evil. So I'm not that kind of person. I don't want to venture down that route. Like entrepreneurship is not meant for me. I'm meant to have a safe job, right? Or a popular example could be a single guy sees an attractive woman, yet instead of doing anything about it, like saying hi to her, he comes up with a story about how this girl is stuck up, or she's only into rich guys, this or that, and he doesn't even know the girl, and he's coming up with that story. So what I think is that these stories we tell ourselves, what I'm getting is that they're there to keep us safe and prevent us from taking risk and kind of doing the scary stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, we do that. Take we you could go a lot of different directions with this, right? We could tell ourselves a story. I remember when I was writing the book, I remember driving past a couple that pulled out in a Bentley, and this is a $250,000 car, and I told myself a story. I'm like, oh, they must have a lot of money. They must be really rich. They must have this certain life. I let my mind sort of run with that. But what's interesting is I don't know the full story of that. I have no idea. They could be in massive debt for all I know. They could be in a marriage that is falling apart. Who knows? There could be a lot of positive things there. I don't know. But when we don't have the information, we certainly could try to create scenarios that fill in those blanks.
Yeah, and so what is the benefit of not telling ourselves these stories and coming up with these stories in our heads?
I think that I have seen it in my own life increase peace and happiness, which I think those are, we pay a lot of money for those things, increasing those in our life. I think our life can be better. One of the things that I talk about in the book is learning how to reduce anxiety, and 7 steps that I put in the book about how to reduce anxiety. I also talk about learning to be a person who's present with other people, where you're actually engaging with another human being, which is incredibly life-giving. And certainly when we're having human-to-human contact and really present, it's life-giving. It's meaningful. It's what we're meant to do and to be. And then also talk about being a person of presence. So when we get so good at being present, there's some things that begin to develop where it becomes more of a habit in our life. So, if you're talking about being more present with people rather than staying in my head, but actually encountering and talking to people, having a relationship with people rather than having a relationship in my head. So relationships improve, anxiety gets reduced. We just show up in relationships differently and with people. And so, that's hard to beat. That's pretty great stuff.
It really is, and very powerful stuff. In the beginning of your book, it's about a family on a vacation. That's the example. And the common theme that I saw was that the family does not want to be where they are now, or they would rather be with somebody else. And so no one's really fully present with the people who really matter on a vacation.
Yeah.
It's a family vacation, and they all want to be someplace else with somebody else. And I can see this spreading out into other areas of life, like at work, or even when you go out and you're trying to be social. You're there physically, but you're thinking about being someplace else with somebody else, which basically makes you not present and you completely checked out.
Absolutely. I actually dedicate a good section of the book on that very topic. I remember back, one of the things that what got me thinking about is that when I went on a vacation with my family about 10, 15 years ago, I was working with a coworker that was a strained work relationship. And I remember spending most of the time on that vacation thinking about, being back home and trying to solve that problem. and frustrated and anxious and all sorts of different emotions about it. And I wasn't present with my family. I was giving precious moments of my life away. And when we're not present, we're not engaging with the actual person. We're living in our head. And so, yeah, I think a large portion of the book, especially towards the end of the book, about learning how to be present and being a person of presence is a big part of sort of the antidote to learning how to stop these narratives and stop these stories, reduce them at least, turn down the volume, is learning how to engage with actual people and be present where you are. Because I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm with a client or I'm with a friend or I'm with my wife, when I am fully, or my kids even, if I'm fully present, I'm there with my mind, my emotions, everything, I'm enjoying that experience so much more. But if I'm not fully there, I'm not quite as enjoying it as much. And because there's something about, when our brain and our body are connected, that sense of congruency that brings, more fulfillment and more life.
Yeah, I noticed when I first started podcasting, a challenge I had was being present with the guests, believe it or not. And really just being present with the guests and listening to what they were saying. Because I used to have like all these tabs open on my computer, emails and messages coming in and all these different distractions and things were growing and things were just, really growing really fast. So I was trying to, multitask and do all these things at once. But when I really focused on being fully present and just closing everything down and just listening to the guest, I can always look back and tell the episodes when I was fully present because it's just such a much deeper conversation.
I don't know about you, but in sessions with clients or even with a friend, like I was talking about, when I'm fully present like that, the time just flies by. It seems like it's like, oh my gosh, there went 45 minutes or 60 minutes. And so I don't know if you have that experience when you're doing these podcasts, when you're fully present with the person you're with, even though you're talking by phone, you're attentive, you're there. And, so it does make a difference. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Time definitely flies. And you wish you had more time sometimes
Hmm.
when you're fully present and just it's over. But back to the stories that we tell ourselves. What if the story that I'm telling myself is actually true?
Yeah.
And it's true. Like this is going to happen. What happens in this scenario?
It's a great question. Most of the stories that we tell, and again, this is not, not every person does it to the same degree. Some people do it more intense and like the volume dials up at an 8 or a 9. They do it a lot. Other people do it less. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And I talk about that in the book as well. But there are stories that we tell that are true. And I think, there's sometimes that our intuition, we've got to look at our intuition and say our intuition is actually telling us something, that we're not always making up stories. We're not always wrong. We're not always missing reality, if you will. But our job is to get clear and to seek more information. In fact, I talk a lot about how to have a conversation with someone where you learn how to seek more information. And there's a way, language to use that can be effective around this. But what happens when the stories are true? Let's imagine for a moment that your partner's with your business partner, right? You guys are starting a new company, and y'all are growing that company, and you're 2 years in. You've dedicated your entire life to this project. He's done the same, or let's say she's done the same. Maybe it's two women, or a man and woman, or two men, whatever it is. And as you look and through some of the financial documents over the last couple of years, you're starting to see some discrepancies, some things that aren't making sense. And you start having this anxiety, like, oh my gosh, I wonder if my partner is stealing money from the company. This is like really, I'm, I'm starting, maybe I'm just telling myself stories here, but it's interesting is that as they do more research and they look into this, it starts becoming more real that this is actually happening. But I think the first thing that you do is that you go and you actually have a conversation with the person. I mean, certainly in certain situations, you might, something like that, you might have to get an attorney involved, and there's other dynamics. But let's imagine that there's just a human to human contact where you have a conversation with that person. And let's say that you say, this is what I'm finding out, what I'm telling myself is that, and I'm wondering whether you took money out of the company. And let's imagine for a moment that either they admit to it, or after a series of questions, they finally admit to it and they say that they have done that. Then what do? Now your intuition is spoken to you, and you're on target. Well, I think you'll go about some of the same process. You walk through the 7 steps of anxiety, because obviously your anxiety is going to go up in that moment. There's going to be all sorts of emotion, whether it be anger, sadness, disappointment, frustration, feeling betrayed, helplessness, and certainly anxiety. And so I think part of being human means that we go through those emotions, whether it's daily or weekly. And what I encourage folks to do is to walk through those 7 steps, which is paying attention to your body and focus on where are you feeling the anxiety or the emotions in your physical body, because that's a way of kind of grounding you in the moment. Grounding yourself through your breathing, grounding yourself. When I say grounding, kind of getting yourself in the moment where your brain's not living somewhere out here. It's not running away. Grounding yourself in terms of looking around the room and kind of connecting with your environment, so you kind of put your both feet on the ground. But I think some of the primary issues besides some of that, more mindfulness is what we call it, behavior, is really learning to live life from a place of controlling what we can control and learning to surrender to what we can't. Many of us hold on to life very, very tightly, and others hold a little looser. And with age and with growth and with maturity and personal development, I think there is something that happens in many human beings where they learn to let go a little bit at a time, and they learn to surrender to life on life's terms and not life on my terms. And so in a situation like that, yeah, you'd have to do the necessary steps, whether it's, illegal, hiring an attorney, and I won't walk through all the exact dynamics of that scenario, but just as far as the emotional piece of that, you have to walk through the things that you can control in your body, and then you have to let go of what you can't control.
Right. So instead of creating a story for ourselves, just don't think anything and first seek to find the truth, because
Yes,
that's really all that matters. The answer is in the truth.
absolutely. Whether if it's a situation in a relationship where we don't know the truth, your boss sends you that email on Friday, right? And maybe you write back. Can you give me an idea of what we're going to be talking about on Monday? I'd like to have some ideas of preparation. And let's say that he or she writes back and says, or doesn't write back. Let's say they don't respond. Well, then Monday you come in there, and your goal still is to seek the truth, right? You may be holding on to the chair really tightly. You're not sure what's coming. Is it a raise? Is it, am I going to be let go? Have I done something wrong? And you're replaying all these scenarios in your mind. But the main piece is that it's learning how to accept life on life's terms and not on ours. And we have this illusion of control that in our lives, that if we can control things, then we're going to feel more safe. you know and I'm not sure we're in control of a lot of things, but there are a few things that we can control, and it's how we show up in that environment, what sort of tone we use in that environment with our boss, what questions we ask, whether we seek information, whether we're accusatory or whether we're seeking more information. So I think those are some of the important pieces, really thinking about what you can control and what you can't.
Yeah, so I think that's really what it comes down to is, we're thinking in our heads this or that because we really just want to be safe. We
Yes.
want to be comfortable. We're
Yep.
wondering, is this external event going to disrupt my life?
Yeah.
And because we
Yeah.
don't know for sure
That's exactly
yet,
right.
this is what creates that anxiety, and that's just like a natural response to the situation, a natural response to something that might potentially change our lives. So,
Yes.
and that it's that same anxiety I feel like that other people can feel. Like you can tell when someone is anxious and they have a lot of anxiety in their body.
You got it, man. You need to write your own book. There you go.
I'm an expert already. No, I actually picked up your book and read through some of it. So, you're actually a good writer. The storytelling is really captivating.
Oh,
So,
good. Thank you.
I was thinking maybe, just earlier, maybe you've been in your head so much that, you got all these great stories to tell because you've been in your head.
That's great. Yeah, like I said, part of the reason I wrote this is I've been doing this for years myself, right? And I'm still learning how to put this into practice. So, there's times that I do this really, really well, and then other times I have to kind of come back to this and begin to, I'm human too, so I'm still growing in this area. But it's certainly been not only doing this, writing the book, but learning and growing in this area has helped me, like I said before, increase peace and happiness in my life and improve my relationships. So that's definitely a positive.
I like that. And now, kind of reflecting back on, you've been a therapist for about 15 years now, and what are some of the common challenges that you see couples face, and how do you help them overcome those challenges?
Some of the common challenges, or whether it be struggling with finances, or whether it be struggling with their sexuality and intimacy, conflict resolution, whether it be parenting issues. I mean, those are some of the big ones that are out there, whether it be infidelity. Certainly that's on the rise, with, a good majority of couples, a good 50% of couples who are dealing with that at some point in their relationship, of some type of infidelity. So, I will say, I'll talk about a couple of these really quickly. One, the conflict piece in the communication is some of the biggest things that I work with. And I don't think it's just a use of language. I know many of us therapists, we sort of teach people to use certain words in certain language, but I think that it's more than that. I think it's how we posture ourselves. Like, if I'm, for instance, one of the things I talk about in the book is if I'm, if a couple's making up a story about the other, rather than saying, you're doing this is exactly what you're doing, rather than pointing the finger and criticizing and living more in a place of criticism or judgment, we try to take a step back and say, okay, this is, when you do this, when you don't hug me and you never reached out for affection in the last 2 weeks in our relationship, what I tell myself, here's the narrative, right? What I tell myself is that you're not interested in me anymore. I wonder if you think that I'm fat or I've gained weight, or if I'm not attractive to you anymore. I tell myself. So when you invite the person into that, what you're doing is you're inviting them to know you. And being known is open and vulnerable, and it takes self-confidence and strength. And it also gives the chance for more intimacy, the possibility for it, rather than being, it's an opportunity that could have gone more, created more anger and defensiveness. But if that person shows up that way, now you've opened up the door for more intimacy. So that's one thing that I work with quite a bit with couples, is learning how to posture themselves in a way where they are letting the other see them. And it's almost like you're talking out loud in front of the other about what's going on in your mind and your emotions. And I think that another way, besides being present with the other, I think it's another way of bringing connection. So it's one of the things I talk with couples about. I mean, certainly I could get into a lot of different stories of what folks work on. And I know I told you a couple things. I think the other one is infidelity. I see a lot of that, whether it's extensive porn use, or whether it's, someone going outside the relationship in some capacity, whether it's hookups or an actual relationship they develop, and how that causes problems in their marriage or with their committed partner. And, I have a lot of couples coming in to see me who are trying to repair things and do a lot of work with infidelity recovery and repair. And so it can be challenging, but there are many couples that get to even a better spot in their relationship as a result of the work, if they're willing to work really hard at it. And there's a process that I take them through. So,
yeah, I really like that strategy. Instead of attacking or accusing your partner of something they've done or something they're not doing or something you would like them to do better, you're opening the door to let your partner into your emotions and just saying, this is how I feel.
Yep.
And I think this is a much more effective approach for not only relationships intimately, but also work relationships.
Yeah. What's going on in your mind and your emotion, both. Yeah. What your thoughts are. A lot of therapists teach folks to talk about their emotions. And what I'm inviting folks to do in this is not only talk about your emotions, but talk about the stories in your head as well. So it's not just an emotional, touchy-feely thing. It's actually inviting the person into your thinking and the narrative that you've been telling yourself, which I think is more holistic in its approach, so yeah.
All right, man, that alone just changed someone's life or relationship. I just know it. So, all right, well, let's now jump into the knowledge round. Are you ready, Scott?
You bet. Let's do it.
Do you feel stuck, alone, or like you're not getting the type of results you think you deserve? You put in all the hard work in your life, relationships, and business, but things just aren't getting any better? I've been there. That's how I started. That's where I was. I kept trying to improve my life, but nothing just seemed to give. I started to think that personal development was a joke. I felt like every month I was in the same place I was the previous month. But then I found something that just worked. I grew, my business grew, my relationships flourished, and everything around me just started to click. People started respecting me more, and I finally felt like I was becoming the man I wanted to be. I created a program to help guys get the same results in their life. Check out kfmline.com to learn how the Lion's Den can radically transform your life. Again, that's kfmline.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. All right, Scott, and the first question here is, what advice would you give to someone who's feeling kind of lost or unsure of what they should do with their life or having trouble finding their purpose?
The first piece of advice is that I would go and sit down with somebody that they respect a lot. Yeah, I think relationships are what it's all about. And if you can sit down with somebody that you really respect and can talk about that feeling of feeling lost and what to do, they can at least help with either some direction, or they can give they can point you in a certain direction, or they can connect you with other people. They can flesh out some things, perhaps some of the conversations. So I think relationships are a big one. I mean, there's more that comes to mind, but I'll just say that.
Yeah, I like that. And Scott, what was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
Oh man, I think I'm still in the process of becoming. I think that'll continue till I'm dead. But what was holding me back? Oh goodness, I mean, anxiety's held me back at times in my life, certainly, and that's one of the reasons why I talk about this, because this has been a personal journey for me to learn how to manage my own anxiety at times and live life on life's terms, not mine.
Yeah, I think that's where most books come from, and even my own podcast for that matter. You're just kind of sharing the journey that you're going through with
Yeah,
others.
yeah, it's coming.
And I find that you may only be a few steps ahead of others, but that is just sometimes all it really takes to really make an impact on someone's life.
That's right. It's awesome.
Yeah, let's now talk about your 3 most influential books. I know, therapist, you got to read a lot. You're an author now,
Yeah.
so what are your 3 most influential books, and explain to the audience why.
Oh wow. Oh goodness, it's putting me on the spot here, isn't it? It's really having to put some thought into this. Let's see. I'm a big fan of Seth Godin's work. He has a lot of really good stuff on personal development that's really, really good out there. Certainly, Brene Brown's book on Daring Greatly is a really solid resource and has meant a lot to me in my journey. I'm a big fan of a lady out of Arizona named Pia Melody, and she's written a lot of work on relationships and works at a treatment facility helping people in recovery in their life out in Arizona, one of the best in the country, called the Meadows. So those are a few people that come to mind that have written books on a variety of topics. I don't necessarily can't pick one. I mean, I feel like several of her resources. Her book on intimacy is really, really good. So those are ones that have come to mind. Those are some of the books that have been pretty meaningful to me.
All right, those are some good books there. And Seth Godin, Brene Brown, very powerful books. So if you want to get one of those books for free in audiobook format, you can go to kfmbook.com and you can get one of those books for free in audiobook format. So that's kfmbook.com. All right, and Scott, what are 2 or 3 life skills that you need in order to succeed in your field?
Well, I would say some of what we've talked about today. I have really worked hard at trying to become more present and not get distracted by so many things. It's a life skill I think that we can all develop. And so that's something that has helped me in my work. I think another life skill I would say is maybe the way I think about things, meaning that my starting place with working with anybody is starting with them as a human being, first and foremost, not male, female, not color of your skin, not rich, having money, not having no money. I mean, just starting with that you're a human being and you have value. And I think that framework has helped me in my work and in my life as well. And then another probably life skill would be authenticity. I think that's something that we've got to develop, in our life, is that taught at a young age that you've got to have it together, and the real successful people have it together, rather than, I think I'm continuing to learn in my own life that none of us have it all together, and we're all working and growing as people. And so that's what makes personal development so great, so beautiful, that there's the possibility for more, and not perfection, but for change and growth and improvement, and just the excitement of that journey.
Yeah, I like that. And now, Scott, imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
It's a question I ask many clients. Something similar to that. That's a great question. I love that question. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, now it's your turn.
Yes.
Now it's your turn.
I'm getting to feel what they feel. Wow. This is good. This is good. Yeah. What I would say, gosh, I would say to him, relax. you know, um, not don't take things so seriously. Enjoy your life, and I would say keep your passion, and don't let people walk over you. Hold on to yourself and stand up for yourself in situations along the way that are going to be beneficial for you and going to help more people if you do.
And anything you would tell yourself not to do.
Maybe not date a certain person here or there. I don't know.
Well, almost every single guy, we're like 100 plus episodes in now, and it's like almost
Do
every
they
single guy
really?
will
Do they
say
really?
something about some girl they wish, they didn't date. It's either that or some
Yeah.
drinking.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I don't know if this is doing differently, but I would say travel more. Take advantage of these few years you have before you get into your real work, and travel more, which I didn't get. I didn't do as much as I wanted, so I don't know if that would fit that framework. But
Yeah, I mean, I think travel has just been so powerful in helping me discover myself and just understand that like there's just so much out there. Like I live in a pretty, decent sized city, San Diego, but I mean, there's an entire world out there. There's an entire world out there, and it just you learn so much, and it just helps you on the journey just to travel more.
yeah, it's educational. It's a lot to learn.
Yeah, and on to the next question here, Scott. Do you have an underrated characteristic that if every person would work on this, they would see massive results in their life?
I think maybe an underrated one is being genuine in my own life and in others. I mean that there's when a person is genuine, you can't help but want to connect with them. There's a sincerity there, and I think that helps tremendously in life. I mean, when you come across somebody who has sincerity and really genuine, you want to trust them. You want to spend more time with them. You want to do business with them. You want to build a relationship with them.
Yeah, I like that. Genuine. Be genuine. It's simple. Now, kind of just reflecting back and looking at what you've accomplished in your career and life, as a therapist and with this book and in your own personal life. What is your philosophy on life and success?
What's my philosophy on life and success? When we talked at the very beginning of this about living life, kind of embodying what you do. This is a little repetitive, but I mean, I got to come back to it. I mean, you said that you do what you do because it's something you're passionate about, and it comes from, your sort of your heart and soul, and it's something that you're doing that's helping you too as you do this, and it's a topic that you're interested in. Same with me. So I think my philosophy is getting clear on the things that you value in your life and your strengths and what you like and what you're drawn to, and spend your energy in that, because that's the type of stuff that you're going to see the most results in, because you can do it longer. You can go through more, you can jump more hurdles, you can go through more trials and continue to do it if you have a passion about it and you love it and it's coming from the inside out. So as far as philosophy goes, I think that's something to live by, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, I love that. When you love what you do, you work so hard, and I find that it's work that someone who doesn't love it isn't willing to do.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Plus, when you're doing something you love, you're gonna be, like you said, you're gonna get more results. You're gonna be much more successful, and you're gonna be happier. At the end of the day, you're gonna be happier that you did it.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, so that's going to conclude the knowledge on there. There's a ton of great advice from Scott. And now let's go into what you're working on now. Like, what's really getting you excited to get out of bed in the morning?
Well, mainly continuing to see clients daily and walking with folks who are, hurting or having some challenges or wanting to improve an area of their life. So that's stuff that gets me out of bed because I love doing that every day. Certainly my marriage and my kiddos, my two boys, definitely get me out of bed every morning and are inspiring. But as far as what I'm working on, right now I'm focusing my energy, besides on my practice and my family, on the book and doing speaking and sharing more, talking to others, either through podcast or radio or speaking different venues, and trying to take this message to a larger audience, because I think it can really help a lot of people. So eventually, my hope is to write some future books that are titled "The Story We Tell Ourselves" as well, but having the subtitle be for CEOs and leaders, and then do another book for parents, and then do another book for couples, that sort of thing. So it's very specific in those areas, and having some similar themes in those books, but more tailored to a particular audience.
Yeah, I could see that taking off, a whole series of books for just different genres. I like that. And so, Scott, how can my audience follow up with you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can email me if they'd like directly at info@rscottgornto.com, and that's info at RSCOTTGORNTO.com. And the other, let's see here, my website is rscottgornto.com, RSCOTTGORNTO. They can hop on there, and I've got some info about the book, and what you can purchase is there, and can email me from there as well. So there's different ways to contact me there.
All right, Scott, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story and life lessons with my community, and pulling out a lot of nuggets from the book and offering that to my community here. So thank you for your time, Scott.
You bet. Hey, I enjoyed talking with you, Andrew. I wish you well in your journey, too.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up episode 114 with Scott Gornto. Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast show. It's been a pleasure having you be a part of a thriving community of men who want to crush it in all aspects of life. I'm on a mission here to inspire millions of guys, and with your help, we're going to make a dent in the universe. Check out knowledgeformen.com for a ton of free content that's designed to help you live a remarkable life. Again, that's knowledgeformen.com. I hope to see you there. And always remember, 2014 is the official year of the crush, where we take action to get the life we've always dreamed of. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and until next time, let's do it.